Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercise my first commemorates vlog style. Happy New Year to you all. Welcome to part 2 of my yearly pop music evaluation, where I rip off every music reviewer ever and go over my favorite songs on this year's Billboard year-end chart. If for whatever reason you have not seen part 1 of this yearly tradition, there's a link in the pullout card as well as in the description. 2022 had quite a bit of difficulties on my end. I wouldn't say I loved this year as much as 2021, even despite getting COVID before filming last year's year-end videos, but the high points were definitely high, be they the huge video projects I produced, all the concerts I went to this year, including finally seeing the Rage Against the Machine and My Chemical Romance reunion tours that were postponed for 2 years, or even just the simple pleasures that came with my first full year maintaining my apartment. It may not seem like much, but a big thing I've learned in recent years is to not strain myself over things I didn't do, especially if it involves comparing myself to someone else, and just enjoy things that make me happy. Mental health was, and still is, a big priority for me, and I'm not saying that as a cop-out or a virtue signal, I genuinely mean that. So in the spirit of positivity, let's get to the year-end video I actually look forward to making. Don't get me wrong, the War Songs videos are fun to make, and I appreciate that you guys really like when I make them, but as anyone that's watched my channel for more than 2 minutes knows, I like talking about stuff I like way more than I like talking about stuff I don't like. As entertaining as deconstruction of dumb pop songs can be to make and to watch, one of my favorite aspects of being a music commentator, or music advocate as Will from Valence called me in the thank you note I got from him in the pre-order bundle for their last album, is talking up what I consider good music. And as someone that's mostly known on here for talking about rock and metal music and appealing to that audience, it's easy to think that all pop music of the current generation is garbage, and making these best songs videos is a great way to remind not just you guys, but also myself that good pop does exist. There's plenty to complain about with the current pop landscape, but that just makes the good stuff all the more special, and that's what the series is all about. The rules, as per usual, are that the songs have to be on the Billboard year-end chart for this year. If you want to verify I'm not bullshitting and the song in question is actually on the chart, the link is in the description for you to do a Command F search and see for yourself that it's there. And since it's inevitable that not everyone's going to agree with my picks, please try to be cool about it. So now let's take a look at my favorite hit songs of 2022. Number 10. Okay, so just like last year, we're starting the list off with Ed Sheeran. I'll be honest, I wish this song was on the year-end chart last year so I could put it in place of Bad Habits. While I like that song, I found Shivers to be much catchier and a more fun experience overall. And while I wouldn't put it on the level of the classic stuff of his from his first 2 albums, and maybe even the third as well, Shivers is really good as a pop single. For one, that pizzicato string part is wicked catchy. It's just 4 little notes up a B minor pentatonic scale, and then shifting the first note down to an A, and then going up an A major pentatonic. It's really tight and sudden, and with much of these notes taking place on the offbeat, it always makes me think of my ears playing a game of Pong with each other. In a way, those staccato notes coming at you as quickly as they do give off a bit of a shivery effect. I also like how we can hear an acoustic guitar tucked behind the pizzicato strings. With how much poppier Ed stuff has been getting in recent times, it's easy to forget that he actually plays guitar, so it's nice to hear it incorporated in. I've always found Ed Sheeran to be a really solid songwriter. While the lyrics here don't exactly strike me as anything mind-blowing, just some carefree lyrics about falling for someone during a night out on the town, which is pretty typical for Ed, his melodies and rhythms are a big part of what sells me on this song. The pre-chorus in particular has always been a standout moment. I wanna be that guy. Didn't that sound funky? It'd be easy for him to have that just be 8th notes like, I wanna be that guy, but singing the first half of that as 16th notes does so much to spice up an otherwise simple line. Another thing I find to be cool about Shivers is the harmonization Ed does in the bridge and the final chorus. It does a lot to fill the song out. And along with that, the rhythm he sings with in the bridge makes me feel like I'm listening to a bossa nova joint. The song is so rhythmically and harmonically interesting, it brings so much more to the table than Bad Habits did. This is for sure the best single Ed's released since Perfect. If his stuff is going to sound less folky as time goes on, I think this is a good sound for him to build off of. Number 9. In Worst Songs of 2022, I talked about Hold Me Closer by Britney Spears and Elton John, a song that remixes and uses elements from Sir Elton's song Tiny Dancer as my dishonorable mention for the year. I mentioned that the song had me feeling unsure about how I feel about him doing these collaborative interpolations of his songs. The big reason why I mentioned that was because I actually quite liked Cold Heart with Dua Lipa, which features a prominent repurposing of Elton's song Rocket Man, aka the song Donald Trump was probably listening to in 2017-2018 when he was egging Kim Jong-un on over Twitter, from his 1972 album Honky Chateau, which I always thought was a funny album title. As I mentioned in the previous video, a thing I always found really admirable about Elton John is his ability to work with artists that are either younger or outside of his general style. Cold Heart is a song in which I see that being much better reflected in than Hold Me Closer, though that could possibly be because I've always liked Rocket Man a little better than Tiny Dancer. If you asked me what my favorite Elton John song was, I'd probably say Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting, but songs like Leave On, I'm Still Standing, The Bitch Is Back, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, Someone Saved My Life Tonight, Benny and the Jets, and yes, Rocket Man would definitely be in the running. Along with Rocket Man, the song also uses lyrics from some lesser-known songs of Elton's. In the singular verse in the pre-chorus, the lyrics come from a song from 1989 called Sacrifice, and in addition to the chorus having Dua Lipa sing the chorus from Rocket Man, Elton joins her for the last two lines, which come from his 1983 single Kiss the Bride. On the surface, it probably sounds like this is just a mishmash of pre-existing Elton John songs thrown on top of the beat by Pinal, but I see more thought being put into creating something new from those songs and making everything sound coherent. To see how, let's take a bit to look at these three songs individually. Sacrifice is a song about the difficulties of being faithful in a marriage. Kiss the Bride is a song about being in love with someone who's about to marry someone else. By the way, I know Elton John is gay, but his songs can basically be interpreted as stories, so I don't think we need to worry about that elephant in the room. And finally, Rocket Man is about a man traveling to Mars, not knowing when it is that he'll make it back, and missing his wife and the life that he left behind throughout his expedition. There's a through-line theme between these three songs: struggle. The lyrics from Sacrifice in the verse and pre-chorus indicate that Elton's been unfaithful in his relationship and made his partner sour towards him. But then we get to the chorus, and while it may seem weird that a song about leaving for an epic space adventure is being used, especially with the "Till Touchdown Brings Me Round Again" part, that's not really the focus here. The focus is on "I think it's gonna be a long, long time," which Dua is the one singing, indicating that it'll take quite a bit of time for her to recover from this revelation, let alone show the man any sort of forgiveness for his transgressions. Both her and Elton sing the Kiss the Bride lyrics at the end of the chorus. Which I see as indicating that they both feel that things could have been better, but are ultimately accepting what is. When analyzing the song's usage of these lyrics, the theme of struggle on the part of both Elton and Dua becomes way more apparent, and thus we have a digestible and believable narrative. Ultimately, in addition to giving us a feel-good throwback to one of Elton John's most classic and highly regarded of songs throughout his over 50-year-long career, I think Cold Heart does his music so much better than Hold Me Closer. It's more coherent, the songs are utilized more creatively, and along with that, the song sounds genuinely good. A big problem I had with Hold Me Closer was how overproduced it sounded, and Cold Heart doesn't sound like it's going that route. Dua Lipa's a great artist that I'm really glad I came around on back in 2020, and this was a fine song for Elton John to add to his repertoire of collaborations with newer artists. Number 8. Stay by the Kid Leroy, or as I sometimes call him, the Kid Leroy, is one of those songs I could very well have included in my best songs video last year, but I ultimately decided against it in favor of the 10 songs I felt more strongly about including. The song came out in July last year, but I don't remember hearing it until around November. Regardless, it was making some serious waves at the time, to the point of charting at number 12 on the year-end chart. I had a feeling it was going to carry over into this year, but I wasn't expecting it to be as much of a mainstay as it was, to the point where it's at number 3 on this year's year-end chart. So even if anybody's going to give me grief for including a song that didn't come out this year in this video, or call me lazy for not talking about it last year when I could have, even aside from the criteria I explained at the beginning of all my year-end videos about how the song only needs to be on the year-end chart of the year in question to be eligible for inclusion, the fact that it maintained its staying power to this extent is not only really impressive, but makes it arguably more a part of this year than it even was last year. It's the same idea behind Circles by Post Malone going from number 62 in 2019 to number 2 in 2020, or Hello by Adele going from number 35 in 2015 to number 7 in 2016. But enough about chart bullshit, what about the song? Well, one thing that really hooked me in is the intervals Leroy uses in the chorus. It's really built around that 7-1-5 pattern, which is really earwormy. But then at the end of the chorus, he leaps up to the leading tone, C. I love the way he plays around with the notes in the D-flat major scale, as I've always found that to be a really cool key. And on the note of that, you want to know what the big thing that grabbed me about Stay is? It kinda sounds like a pop-punk song. A lot of the third wave pop punk bands, I'm talking bands like Real Friends, Knuckle Puck, Neck Deep, etc., like writing in the key of D-flat major, and the melodies in Stay sound just like the kind of stuff those bands would write when playing in that key. Every time I've heard the song, I keep thinking of how much it wants to be a pop punk song, or how it's just begging for a pop punk band to do a cover of it. I honestly think it would sound badass in that kind of a context. You can even hear traces of that in the metal cover Derek Blackman made of the song that sounds pretty easycore. Even the lyrics sound like stuff you could see those kinds of bands writing, right down to the woes in the pre-chorus. Topics like love, doubt, fear, and the like are fairly common in the style, so I see a lot of potential for this song to be the pop-punk banger it sounds like it wants to be. And to enhance that idea, let's give this our first solo treatment. Another noteworthy thing about Stay For Me is how this is the first time I've liked a song that features Justin Bieber. Though if I'm being honest, I never really noticed any kind of stretch between his voice and Leroy's outside of when he does this. So baby, stay. They have pretty similar sounding voices, so it's pretty easy for me to have a headcanon that this is all Leroy. It's similar to the reason why Love Yourself is the one song of Bieber's I ever found to be tolerable, because it's basically an Ed Sheeran song, which is due in large part to the fact that the song was co-written with Sheeran. But I think another way I could look at the vocal similarities between Bieber and Leroy on the song is that Bieber was just able to match Leroy's tone and energy. Like I remember saying about Panini by Lil Nas X a couple years ago, this is a song that I think could really benefit from being longer. The song comes and goes pretty quickly. Maybe have a bridge, or maybe an instrumental break, or hell, maybe a solo of some kind. Regardless, Stay's a cool song. Here's to hoping that more pop songs incorporate some pop-punk elements. Number 7. Yep, this is the second time I'll have spoken positively about a Taylor Swift song. Although if I'm being honest, the first time was with a song that's honestly kinda meh in hindsight. Longtime viewers of the channel know that I have not been the kindest to T Swift over the years, mainly since I always found her to be really bloated and a lot of her songs to be really immature. The songs of hers that I've featured in the Worst Songs series over the years are still songs I really dislike, especially I Knew You Were Trouble and You Need to Calm Down, which I should have put at number 1 in Worst Songs of 2019. But there was one thing that got me to reevaluate my opinion a little on Taylor Swift. You might have noticed in the transition clip that next to the title it says in parentheses, Taylor's version. For those that don't know what that's about, here's a little backstory. Taylor Swift was signed with Big Machine Records as the label's first client when she made her first 6 albums. In 2018, her contract with them expired, so she ended up signing with Republic Records, a label owned by Universal. Following this, Big Machine then got purchased by a company called Ithaca Holdings, which is ran by a guy named Scooter Braun, who's best known for managing the likes of Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Demi Lovato, among others. This meant that he was now the one to have ownership of the master recordings of those first 6 albums of Swift's. I own all your songs, losers! What that essentially means is, when you sign with a label and release music on that label, while you as the artist have publishing rights as the writer and performer, which entitles you to a cut of a record's earnings, the label not only receives a large cut as the owner of the master recordings, but that also gives them the ability to do whatever with the songs, such as licensing them for use in commercial properties. Taylor, not liking this, especially due to her disliking of Old Scoot, tried to buy back the rights to her masters from Big Machine, but got denied. And upon realizing how messy of a situation this was, she decided, if you can't beat 'em, show 'em! She basically declared that if she wasn't going to get her masters back, then she's going to re-record her albums so that she can essentially own her own master recordings. It's not too dissimilar to the reason a lot of bands opt to release their music independently so they don't need to worry about that sort of middleman. So far, Taylor's released Taylor versions of her 2008 album Fearless and her 2012 album Red. It may seem like these albums are basically the Disney live-action remix of music in the sense that they're nothing more than shameless cash grabs made to appeal to nostalgia, but there's one song in particular that gets me to think otherwise. Upon the release of the Taylor version of Red, there was lots of buzz surrounding a track on the album called All Too Well that was 10 minutes long. This got an eyebrow to raise because that's not something you see a lot of pop artists do. Most pop artists tend to keep their songs on the shorter side, mainly because that's what radio stations have a preference for, along with, let's be honest, the average listener's short attention span. That's not to say that all pop artists do this. In the pop playlist in my iTunes, you can see that a lot of the lengthier stuff there is by Justin Timberlake. But I and others tend to associate really long songs with progressive rock and progressive metal, and it's not something typically associated with pop acts, let alone Taylor Swift. So I wondered, what is it that's making this song 10 minutes? Are we getting an extensive solo break like what a band like King Crimson or Rush or Yes would do? Well, no. She just had a lot to say. It's the same rationale behind long-form YouTube videos. A majority of the time, they aren't long because of dragged-out points, slow pacing, and superfluous padding. There's just a lot of information and elaboration there, so you can't really blame them for being as long as they are. A common talking point about Taylor Swift is that she writes a lot of songs about her exes. This song is no exception to that, with the man in question here being actor Jake Gyllenhaal. But it's not as bitter or pretentious as you might think. It's a lot calmer, laid back, and reflective to the point where you question if maybe she had it in her to be rational this whole time. Or maybe it was just that those songs were what her label and producers thought of as making for the best singles. All Too Well has her remembering the nice times in the early days of this relationship in the first part of the song, even making note of the little things that she associates with this period in her life. That's something I can relate to a lot, since I'm someone that not only enjoys nostalgic indulgences, but also places intrinsic value on when it was that I indulged in them and where I was at the time. This is another line I can relate to. I might be okay, but I'm not fine at all.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
I've dealt with a lot of hardships and disappointment in my life, and while I'm capable of picking myself up, in addition to turning to things like music, movies, binges of shows, etc. for comfort, a thought that enters my mind a lot is one of the trickiest questions I can think of. I'm content, but am I really happy? Even after dealing with something like a breakup in Taylor's case, when you're needing all the comfort you can get, that comfort can mean the world to you and feel really nice in that moment, but does that mean everything is fine? Not really. The original version of All Too Well is 5 minutes long. I do see a difference in production, with the original sounding more like an early 2010s soft indie song that you'd likely hear in a movie around the time, while the Taylor version sounds more down to earth and not as watered down. Other than the length, the big differences between the two versions lie in the lyrics. The Taylor version adds more lyrics to the third verse and second chorus, 2 new verses, and an extended outro. While the original version is basically a standard breakup ballad, the Taylor version adds more layers to really put into perspective just what the relationship and subsequent fallout meant to her. The original version's third verse shows some of that nostalgia for the phase of the relationship where she got to learn more about Jake's upbringing, while in the Taylor version she uses that as a means of lamenting about how they eventually weren't really on the same wavelength and hinting at some communication issues. The first of the new verses, taking place after the bridge, shows her disappointment at how much he had changed since they started dating, along with expanding more on how the initial blow of the breakup felt. And the second new verse and outro, taking place right after, shows her expanding on how damaged she felt, and ultimately accepting that while she tries to move on, this memory will always be with her. Though this line,
"And I was never good at telling jokes, but the punchline goes, I'll get older, but your lovers stay my age."
makes me think of the episode of BoJack Horseman where Mr. Peanut Butter recollects on Halloween parties he took his previous partners to, and wonders why they eventually stopped being cool, and reality starts to hit that the women he dates get younger and younger because he doesn't seem to want to grow up, and thus his partners end up outgrowing him. Along with, of course, this classic line from Dazed and Confused.
That's what I love about these high school girls, man. I get older, they stay the same age. Yes, they do.
I feel like the original version of All Too Well was a half measure, and the Taylor version was what Taylor had always intended the song to be. While what likely happened is that she was told back in 2012 to shave half the song off, I like to think that in the time since then, she gained some new perspective from thinking harder on her past relationships, and felt that this song in particular deserved more meat and layers so that it could be a stronger and more developed breakup song. People change and people grow, and I like to think that anyone can be capable of experiencing this kind of character development. I like to think of myself as being someone that's experienced this kind of growth and development, because I see myself as a much different person than I was 10 years ago, or even 5 or 6 years ago. And it's that aspect that made me kinda tear up a little listening to this song. Even divorced from the situation regarding her masters, I'm glad Taylor revisited this song. This may not mean much coming from me since I've made it no secret over the years that I'm not a Swiftie, but this is the best song I've ever heard from Taylor Swift. And it's really nice that everyone is validating this development on her end, let alone supporting her in her quest to regain control of her songs, even if a sizable portion of that support might come from fans merely being profusely loyal. It may not be incredibly high on the year-end chart, but I think the fact that it even made it on at all really speaks volumes as to how much love people have for this song. And since hit radio stations aren't known for playing songs this long like a classic rock station playing an entire side of a record, this implies that the success of Taylor's version of All Too Well came entirely from the people, and that's really cool. Number 6. Well, given that one of the videos I put out this year was an hour-long countdown about songs from Disney movies, I'm sure everyone watching this saw this coming. At the time of making that video, though, I had not yet seen Encanto, and even if I did, it's doubtful that any of its songs would have resonated with me that quickly to the extent I would even consider them for inclusion in that video. But I did eventually get around to watching the movie, and while I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much as some other Disney movies from the past decade, I liked it a lot. It's really colorful, the characters are all enjoyable, and it has some great songs written by the impeccable Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's best known for writing the songs in Moana, and of course Hamilton, which I haven't seen, but everyone I know that's into theater loves it. If I had to pick a favorite song from Encanto, it would actually be Waiting on a Miracle, as it reminds me a lot of myself and the desire I consistently feel for something greater to come along in my life, and the need to break out of whatever situation I'm in at the time, but yet not knowing what to do to get to that point. Unfortunately, that song didn't make the year-end chart. It was a pretty close call as to which of the two songs from the movie that made it on the year-end chart I wanted to include in this video. We Don't Talk About Bruno or Surface Pressure. When I rewatched Encanto as part of my research for this video, as well as just to refresh myself on the movie, I noticed I was pretty back and forth on these two songs. Surface Pressure is another song I find to be quite relatable, as I'm someone that's dealt with similar feelings of stress that Luisa expresses, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and no one else seems to understand because they're blinded by their expectations of you. In particular, it made me think a lot of how I feel whenever people, such as my parents, ask me for help with technological inquiries because they see me as a tech genius, when that is not how I see myself. But I ultimately decided to go with We Don't Talk About Bruno for this list since, well, that's the song I have the most fun with in the movie. Before I get into it though, I just need to say this. We're not supposed to talk about Bruno? Bruh. I've been talking about Bruno on this channel for almost a decade. In fact, we're going to be talking about him later on in this video. There's nothing at all wrong with Bruno. He is cool, so please let me talk about him, you schmucks. Okay, so the song's obviously not referring to that Bruno, so you're probably asking, who is Bruno and why don't we talk about him? And to answer that, we need to give some context. Encanto is a movie about a family called the Family Madrigal, who are blessed with magical powers following a miraculous candle and sentient house being bestowed onto the grandmother, or abuela of the family, Alma, after losing her husband. Each member of the family has a power that's used to help their community, such as the super strong Luisa and the perfect flower-blooming Isabella. However, the film's main protagonist, Mirabel, wasn't given a power, so she lives in the shadow of the rest of her family, who see her as something of a burden. On the night her young cousin Antonio receives the power to communicate with animals, Eliza Thornberry needs to meet this guy. Mirabel notices the house starting to crack and the candle starting to flicker, and she sees this as an opportunity to not only save the miracle's magic, but also get in the good graces of her family and make up for the fact that she has no magical power. Luisa suggests to her after surface pressure that the answer to what's going on may have to do with something in the tower of their outcasted uncle, Bruno. Mirabel then investigates the tower and finds some glowing green glass, and when she puts it together to reveal an image of herself, she surmises that Bruno may be the one person who can explain what this means. But when other family members of hers catch her inquiring about Bruno, they all enter into a song about why he is not to be spoken about. See, he has the power to see into the future, having prophesied things like a hurricane taking place during his sister's wedding, Mirabel's cousin Dolores losing the man of her dreams to someone else, and even little things like this chick's goldfish dying and this dude getting fat. Bruno was essentially considered dangerous, especially after the vision he had pertaining to Mirabel, leading the family to believe he was responsible for why she didn't get any powers, so he never showed his face around the house ever again, and the family refused to acknowledge him. Although there's this one line that I always found to be really clever. That line's not only referring to this guy Mariano that's about to propose to Isabella, but it also refers to the fact that Bruno is actually still present, lurking in the shadows of the house. It's weird how this was the song from the movie that became such a colossal hit, since when you think of other Disney songs that achieved that status, like A Whole New World, which was the last Disney song to hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 before this, Beauty and the Beast, Can You Feel the Love Tonight, You'll Be in My Heart, and even Let It Go. These are songs with lyrics that sound like stuff you'd hear on the radio. You'd probably not even realize that these were songs from Disney movies if you weren't already aware. With Encanto, songs like the previously mentioned Waiting on a Miracle and Surface Pressure kinda have that effect going for them. That's not something that can be said about We Don't Talk About Bruno. But then again, you probably couldn't say that about a lot of the songs I featured in my Disney songs video. Those are the songs I find to be the most standout and entertaining, in addition to musically interesting, and that's the appeal of We Don't Talk About Bruno. On the note of that, let's talk about the music and the composition. The instrumentation sounds really classy and sophisticated, fitting for the culture being portrayed in the movie. I like the dramatic piano and the relationship between the C minor and G dominant 7 chords. The second verse takes me a bit out of it with its usage of R&B sounding percussion, but it makes for some interesting contrast. And it kinda makes sense since the characters sing in this verse, Dolores and Camilo, are both younger people within the family. But it's the final verse that's really interesting with its overlapping of all the different verses. It's chaotic but kinda cool. I really dig the way the characters all play off each other throughout the song like you'd see in a Broadway production, especially here. And the instrumentation sounds a lot more amplified to correspond with all the furor about this Bruno character. Even if she didn't put the glass pieces together to find that she might be playing a role in what's going on with the house, it's not a wonder that Mirabel expresses regret at even asking about him.
Why did I talk about Bruno?
Also, I love the way she rolls her R there. A lot of people were saying throughout the year that it says a lot about the state of the pop charts when much of the attention was going to songs from a Disney movie. Me being a fan of Disney movies, I never really understood that mindset. Disney movies have a reputation for having some sensational music numbers, and it's nice to see that they're still able to release a movie with music that gets people as excited as they did. The songs are still strong on their own, and while I might not love the songs in Encanto to the same extent that I do the songs I talked about in my Disney Songs Countdown, I'm glad they made the impact that they did. And Encanto is definitely a movie I'd recommend checking out if you haven't seen it. Even if you aren't someone that can relate to the characters experiencing feelings of imposter syndrome or general pressure, I'm sure that with the help of jams like We Don't Talk About Bruno, it'll be an enjoyable experience. Number 5. Dude, I get to talk about Filthy Frank in a Best Songs video? What? This is George Miller, aka Joji, but if you've been watching YouTube for up to a decade like I and the majority of people watching this video, you know him as Filthy Frank. Papa Franku, Sir Francis of the Filth, and an assortment of other characters in the Omniverse he plays like Chin Chin, Salamander Man, and of course Pink Guy, under which alias he's released 2 comedy rap albums, 2014's Self-Titled and 2017's Pink Season. In my opinion, he's one of the most legendary YouTubers of all time that push the limits of what's acceptable on this site. He's made some iconic memes, created some of the most interesting lore you can find on YouTube, and just in general made some really funny and entertaining content that I and many other people have enjoyed for years. However, in 2017, Joji retired the Filthy Frank character for a few reasons. For one, much like what happened with M Shadows that got him to do less harsh vocals in Avenged Sevenfold's music, doing that voice did a number on Joji to the point where it was putting his health at risk.
The fact that you say today's music sucks shows that you've only explored the shitty surface of music without actually having the effort to actually look through some decent music.
For two, demonetization was in full effect on YouTube by this time, and I'm sure it brought into question if Filthy Frank really had a place on the site going forward. And for three, he was wanting to pursue music, by which I don't mean the silly pink guy music, I mean serious music. It was disheartening to see the Filthy Frank show come to an end, a series that in a way helped to define mid-2010s YouTube, but ultimately Joji's reasons behind making this decision were completely understandable. His passion clearly lied in music, and whether you're listening to the pink guy stuff or his work as Joji, it really shows. I got into his music in late 2018 when Atticus the Death Metaler and I were making our collaborative Danny Phantom and Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy countdowns for Halloween. At the end of the segment in Atticus's video on the episode Grim and Love, he played a little AMV of Grim and Malaria dancing together in the rain to Joji's song Slow Dancin' in the Dark. To this day, I'd say that's my favorite song of his, and ever since then, I've been following his career and staying on top of whenever he releases new music. I should mention, though, that I wasn't incredibly crazy about the album he put out this year, mainly due to how short it was and how unfinished a lot of the songs sounded, but the highlight of the album is definitely its lead single, Glimpse of Us, and it feels really gratifying seeing it on the year-end chart this year, almost like a gift for us Filthy Frank fans. So let's talk about it. One thing I like about this that you can hear in a number of Joji's material is this air sound that gives off a vibe that you're listening to the song on a vintage vinyl player. It's a staple of lo-fi music, and sounds like that get the song to sound like you're hearing it in a classic film. Adding on to the classiness, you know I love my A-flat major ballads, so of course these chords are going to sound really good to me. One interesting thing about the chord progression is its use of the E-flat 7 chord, the 5 chord in the key of A-flat, that gives it some haunting sounding dissonance. The same kind of effect happens in the transition between the bridge and the final chorus, where we hear an F7 chord instead of an F minor. Joji's vocals are also smooth yet saddened, since this is a song about missing a former partner while in a new relationship. My favorite moments of his performance are when he uses his falsetto in the upper octave, which gives off a pretty goosebumpy effect. It's the kind of melody I'd lose my shit over if it were played by a guitar on a solo section. The only thing I wish is that there were drums, as I feel like they would add to how atmospheric the song gets. Again, the sadness we can kind of sense in Joji's voice makes the song sound somewhat haunting. The line, "Perfect don't mean that it's working," is a line that I think implies there's always a dark side to even the happiest relationships. It makes me think of that Robin Williams quote about how the saddest people seem happy. Glimpse of Us describes how even though Joji is in this happy relationship, or at least one that he's able to feign happiness in, he still has thoughts of a previous lover and wants to feel like he's with her. It's a lot like Not Over You by Gavin DeGraw in that regard, but it doesn't strike me as being as on the nose. Rather, I feel like the music helps to portray him as feeling kind of bad that he isn't able to connect with his partner, a partner that he knows is perfect for him, the way that he feels like he should. This might not be a song that reinvents the wheel, it may be a simple little piano ballad, but it feels like a lot more. Would I care about the song if it weren't made by the man behind the Cake trilogy? I don't know, it's hard to say. When I was going through the year-end chart picking out the songs I wanted to talk about for my year-end videos and wrote Glimpse of Us down, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just going to be making this about Filthy Frank. That's not who Joji is anymore. Even though in our hearts he still is. And that's not what the point of this is supposed to be. Even as I'm writing this part of the script, I'm hoping I haven't been spending too much of this segment talking about Franku than I should be about the song this segment is about. But I'm nonetheless really happy that he's finally experienced this level of chart success. Hopefully any new fans he reaches that look into his history and discover the treasure trove that is the Filthy Frank content don't feel the need to take this achievement away from him just because they misunderstood the point of the content. There's already enough cringe in the world, this ain't the kind that should be added to it. Given how much of a milestone it is seeing a man go from one of the most iconic YouTubers of all time to a wonderful pop musician and having his first top 10 hit, I'm going to do something I've never done in this series before. I'm going to invite someone on to give his thoughts on this song. He's the person I know as being the most passionate Filthy Frank fan I've met, as well as the person I owe a debt of gratitude to for getting me into the new phase of Joji's career. Please welcome my favorite death metaler and yours, Atticus the Death Metaler.
Hey everybody, this is Atticus the Death Miller, and thank you for having me on board for this video, Shades. Now, you are all probably wondering why I am not showing off my beautiful face and just my avatar. Well, it's the simple fact that I look like absolute shit for working 5 weeks nonstop, and of course been fighting off a cold. I just came fresh out of the fucking sauna. Now, Shades asked me to be on this segment in talking about Joji, aka Francis of the Filth, in which I feel honored to talk about. I think Shades hit off all the notes on what the song is about, but I have a different perspective of the song I would like to go into. I can remember first listening to this track and being nothing short but absolutely stunned. I really thought Slow Dancing in the Dark was his magnum opus, but it's safe to say that Glimpse of Us really tightens up on your heartstrings. To think that this was the man that made content where I would just laugh my ass off after a day in college or just showing off to my friends and coworkers would be the same guy who would make one of the most sad yet beautiful tracks I have ever come across. So beautiful that it actually made me cry on a day when I received one of the worst but inevitable news. July 12th, after a busy shift, all of you who know me from my channel, I got the news that my Aunt Jean finally passed away from her long and agonizing battle with ovarian cancer. Hearing the news instantly broke me. I tried hitting the gym, but ultimately when I headed home, I just began to break down in tears. The one song that I played nonstop while releasing all of my hurt and grief was on that song. This was 2 months after my grandmother passed away, where she lived a long and illustrious life at the age of 96. Meanwhile, my aunt's final moments were excruciating. It took a long time for me to be at peace up until Halloween weekend, where I performed a sort of eulogy for her. I had that song stuck in my head to give me motivation, where I would catch a glimpse of her in my heart. Besides all that, this song was such a beautifully written song for anyone going through hardship, whether it's from a breakup, rejection, or a death in the family or friends. But it's a sad but beautiful song that came from the very man himself, who was Filthy Frank. Rest in peace, Aunt Jean.
So now that the segment's pretty much over, Atticus, you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think so.
It's Filthy Frank, motherfucker! It's Filthy Frank, bitch! Let's get some pussy tonight!
By the way, when I downloaded that clip for this video, I saw this in the comment section. If there ever comes a time where we see Joji live, we need to do this. Number 4. This is one of the most fun songs about depression I've ever heard that wasn't by an emo band. So this is M. Byhold, the next in line of young artists to get big on our dear friend TikTok and subsequently scooped up by our old friends Republic Records. Numb Little Bug was her major label debut single, and it gives me lots of early 2010s indie-ish vibes. You wouldn't expect a song that touches on this kind of subject matter to get as out there as it did, and even if we have TikTok to thank for it, I'm glad that it happened. The melody is really neat, and I like the way it functions harmonically, but really it's the chord choices that make the song stand out. A-flat minor has always been a key I've found to be really cool, and I particularly like the song's use of the E-flat 7 chord in the chorus that functions as the turnaround in the progression. But there's also that part where we hear a G natural followed by a G flat in the verses that functions a similar way. Same with the E major 7 and E minor chords in the pre-chorus. These are funky curveballs, but that's anxiety for you. They're unconventional and atypical, and I love the song's usage of them. But I think you all know the real reason this song's here. I'm someone that deals with a lot of anxiety and depression. Unlike M, I'm somehow able to manage without the need for any medication, as weird as that may be to believe. But that doesn't mean I don't experience similar kinds of feelings that she describes. She experiences numbness from the medication that she takes, which she's unable to pronounce and unable to count the amount that she has to take for her dose. But moreover from that, she expresses in the first verse how her depression has caused her to lose touch with her friends and just generally feel overwhelmed by the world. I relate to that fine enough, but it's the chorus that really hits home. Just like I talked about in the All Too Well segment, M says that she's unhappy, but yet doesn't want to die. She knows that she can't in good conscience say that she's happy. The depression very clearly exists and probably always will, but that doesn't mean that she's wanting to not even bother making it another day. Something I've always found to be admirable and profound is when someone who deals with depression shows that they're willing to persevere, keep moving forward, and show even the slightest bit of hope that things can get better. Me being an optimist, I'm always of the belief that there's no reason not to keep going, even when I feel so miserable from things like overthinking, anxiety spikes, or general fear of failure. I can't tell you the number of times where I felt dead inside from how overwhelmed I've gotten from the frustrations of life, disappointment that things didn't go the way I had hoped, a lack of motivation, and feeling stuck both mentally and physically. But I know that things will be different down the line. Obviously you need to put in work for that, and you may not be 100% motivated, but even the idea of everything being alright soon is enough for me. I don't expect a ton of people to understand this, but that's a big thing that's kept me going in life. It's really comforting that a song like Numb Little Bug exists. I don't feel like I'm being talked down to, or that this is some out-of-touch corporate idea of what anxiety and depression depression feel like? M just sounds like a normal person who's had similar experiences to people like us, and is wanting to show that you aren't the only person in the world that's ever felt shitty, overwhelmed, drained but still alive, or numb. I find myself thinking a lot about Inside Out when I listen to the song, since that's a movie that has a prominent showcasing of someone dealing with feelings of numbness and feeling overwhelmed at all the changes that were dumped on her through her family's move to a new city. Like, if we ignore the plot about joy and sadness getting sucked out of the main HQ and into the vast land of Riley's assorted memories, we see a story about someone dealing with feelings of anger, fear, and disgust at adapting to a new life away from everything she ever knew. Riley essentially feels a similar way as M describes in the song, leading me to wonder if maybe M took some inspiration from Inside Out when writing Numb Little Bug. In the end, both pieces of media provide solace that you aren't the only one to feel depressed. Even if M doesn't outright say this in the song, I'm sure she's of the understanding that there's nothing at all wrong with feeling this way, just as Riley's parents assure her when she finally lets loose about how unhappy she is missing home. It's okay to feel sad, and it's perfectly natural to feel overwhelmed in life. No matter how mentally and emotionally draining you might feel, the fact that you're still here and willing to make it another day is gratifying and speaks volumes as to the power and strength that you exhibit. That's why it's really touching that a song like Numb Little Bug can exist in the mainstream. It's here for all of us that deal with depression, and for that, I say to M. Byhold, thank you. Can you give me a moment to take a breather? Number 3. Okay, so I know I said in last year's video that I was going to bookmark Easy On Me for this year since I knew full well that it was going to carry over, and while it's really cool to see that I got to number 4 on the year-end chart, I was mainly wanting to bookmark it because I wasn't sure if there were going to be any other singles from 30 making it on the year-end chart. And lo and behold, we have another Adele song on here on the form of Oh My God, and I like it a lot better. Plus, I'm not sure what else I could say about Easy On Me that I didn't say in last year's video. It's a nice little piano ballad, but I'll take any chance I get to talk about a different song of Adele's, especially one as fun as this. When we think of Adele, we tend to think of sad piano ballads with angelic and soulful singing. We love that stuff from her, hence why I've talked about a number of them in this series. But it's easy to forget that that's not all she does. Hell, her biggest and most acclaimed and beloved song, Rollin' in the Deep, was a song that I said in Best Songs of 2012 bordered on sounding like a rock song. While ballads might be her bread and butter, the songs of hers that aren't of that classification can make for some real standout performances. Unless she incorporates that weird reggae stuff like in Send My Love to Your New Lover. But man is Oh My God a bop. This almost sounds like Adele singing a Bruno Mars song, kinda like how Bruno's song When I Was Your Man could be seen as being the other way around. That comparison might sound sacrilegious, but given how Bruno and Adele are my two favorite current pop artists, to say the least I'm pretty blown away at how cool those two styles converging can sound. The verses have her retain the soulfulness we like hearing from her, so it's not like anything's being sacrificed on her end. Adele's written some great choruses throughout her career, but this one is for sure the catchiest I've heard from her. It may sound unconventional if you're not used to hearing anything from her that isn't a piano ballad, but it's simply a hooky pop chorus. The swung rhythms are great to hear against the beat, and in B-flat minor no less, one of my favorite keys. And whenever a pop song is in a key I like and has a feel I like, it's begging me to give it a solo treatment. I'm just now realizing this is in the same key signature as Stay. Guess I just like playing in this key that much. In addition to this very different feel, the lyrics are also quite different for Adele. I mentioned earlier that we tend to associate her with sad piano ballads, but not only is Oh My God not a ballad, it's not sad either. When I talked about Easy On Me last year, I mentioned how 30 is an album that chronicles everything surrounding Adele's divorce. I also said this at the end of the segment. It's actually not too dissimilar from Happier Than Ever if you think about it, and that's where I hope Adele can bring herself. We're basically getting the payoff with this song. She sounds liberated and through the roof, ready to have fun as a single woman for the first time in quite a while and not care what any of you prudes think.
I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm a grown woman and I do what I want to do.
But along with this excitement, we can also feel some hesitancy on her end in places like the pre-chorus and chorus. Even if the chorus is indicating that she's found someone to potentially jump into something new with, this is still new territory for her. But as apprehensive as new territory like this can make you feel, it's still able to generate some anticipation for what lies ahead. Ever since 30 came out last year, Oh My God has become one of my new favorite Adele songs. While I like Easy On Me as much as the next guy, I'd be lying if I were to say it didn't exhilarate me the way this song did. It would have been easy, pardon the pun, of me to just cut and paste what I said about Easy On Me last year into this video, like I did with Gucci Gang and War Songs of 2018 when it made the year-end chart that year after being in my dishonorable mention section the previous year. But I'm glad I didn't, and I'm glad a song as fun as this gave me a reason to not do that. Number 2.
I highly recommend checking out the rest of Silk Sonic's album, particularly the tracks After Last Night, Smoking Out the Window, Skate, and Blast Off. I hope I'm not being kept waiting too long for whatever Bruno does next, whether it be solo or with Silk Sonic, because even something like Leave the Door Open gives me so much to look forward to.
Sweet, I get to talk about my favorite song from the Silk Sonic album. Just like what I said earlier about Easy on Me, a part of me was worried when I talked about Leave the Door Open last year that would be all we'd get as far as charting singles go. So you can only imagine how ecstatic I was that not only was there another song from Silk Sonic's debut that charted high enough to qualify for inclusion on the year-end chart, but also because, as I said a little bit ago, the song in question is my favorite from the album. Leave the Door Open, despite that smooth like a newborn line, is a cool bedroom song, but Smoking Out the Window is just sexy. The main reason why this is my favorite song Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak made together is because I see it as being the song that best sums up their sound on the album. Smooth, soulful, funky R&B with high-class production that makes you feel like you're flying. It doesn't feel as soft as Leave the Door Open, and along with that, the song does a lot of bouncing between Bruno and Anderson, making them sound a lot more complementary to each other. As a result, Smoking Out the Window just makes for a much more fun song. What really pushes the song over the top are all the harmony vocals in places like the chorus, as well as the triplet fills Anderson throws in on the drums. As I pointed out last year, his drumming does so much to add to the authenticity of Silk Sonic's material. This was apparently the first song Bruno and Anderson wrote together. We already know that the both of them have an apparent old-school R&B influence on their respective styles, but a significant aspect of Silk Sonic's strengths boil down to the chemistry between the two men, and that's a major part of what makes Smoking Out the Window so fun. It is the two of them telling stories about women that took advantage of them. Bruno's verse has him talking about his lady running his wallet dry, her kids being really jumpy, and even getting him to throw fists with her UFC fight necks. Anderson's verse, on the other hand, has him recounting a night where his girl was fantasizing about Hercules, I suppose, and just generally feeling like he's being used in much the same way Bruno is. They both feel dejected by these relationships, and thus take some drags outside as they think, fuck man, this ain't right. The situations being depicted in the lyrics might not sound glamorous, but I see Smoking Out the Window functioning as a way for Bruno and Anderson to say to each other, hey man, I'm here for you, let's blow this shit. It's their friendship that pulls the both of them out of feeling let down by their partners, and that's ultimately what I felt the theme of Silk Sonic was, two bros just having a good time together making some sexy jams, and I'm glad I got to talk about them again with a song as awesome as this. For my honorable mention this year, I noticed there was a lot of Stranger Things hype, to the point where Runnin' Up That Hill by Kate Bush made it on the year-end chart at number 23. I'd heard the name Kate Bush thrown around a fair bit in my life, but didn't actually look into her music until this year. And no, it wasn't because of Stranger Things, since I've never watched the show before. Hey, at least I made the decision to look into her stuff on my own. It's solid artsy progressive pop, with lots of that 80s flair goodness, you can't go wrong. But this isn't the song I wanted to talk about here. Instead, I want to talk about Master of Puppets by Metallica, baby! Like the Kate Bush song, this song was featured in Stranger Things since the show takes place in the mid-80s, and it's because of its feat in the show that it managed to hit number 35 on the Billboard Hot 100 this year. Again, I've never watched Stranger Things before, so I can't really comment on that. I'm just delighted that it exposed a new generation to Metallica's music, and with a song as magnificent as Master of Puppets no less, with its pristine riffage, gnarly vocals from James Hetfield, wicked solo from Kirk Hammett, Lars Ulrich at his A-game behind the kit, and triumphant bass playing from the late Cliff Burton. I'm one of those thrash or trash Metallica fans that doesn't really care for the Black Album, and if I'm being honest, I'm really sick of Enter Sandman, so it's nice to see that they went with a song like this to have Eddie Munson play. I get that to us metal fans, Metallica's kinda surface level, but remember, it's always the surface level acts that function as the gateway in. We wouldn't have gone down the rabbit holes we did were it not for popular acts like Metallica, and if it takes a show like Stranger Things, let alone a character like Eddie Munson, to influence people to look into Metallica, then I'm glad for that. It's hardly different at all from me getting into a lot of the bands I'm into through Guitar Hero. When it comes to how you discover music, the ends justify the means. As Metallica themselves said, we all started at ground zero. At the end of the day, these are new Metallica fans that should be welcomed on board. We were just like that once upon a time. So if you're gonna push these people away just because of their age, or because they're just getting their foot in the door, or because they discovered a band through a popular piece of media, ask yourself this: what does that say about you? Better yet, what does that say about metal? Okay, I think I've ranted enough about this and gave you enough of a throwback to classic anti-elitist shades. I'd love to gush about Metallica some more and how happy I am for Master of Puppets' resurgence, but I'd like to get to my number one. I've talked about some amazing songs in the number one spot in my best songs videos throughout the almost 10 years I've been making videos on this channel, from bangers like Uptown Funk and Blinding Lights to tearjerkers like When We Were Young and Breathin'. But I feel like this song is probably my most profound choice I've ever made for the top spot thus far. Harry Styles has been becoming one of my favorite pop artists. It's been so interesting seeing his evolution, going from the face of a boy band to making more rock-inspired material like that rocker Kiwi, to refining his sound without losing his rock appeal. While the album he put out this year, Harry's House, which is better than Mr. Peanut Butter's House, is probably my least favorite of his 3 albums, which I'm mainly saying because I have the hardest time deciding which I like better between the self-title and A Fine Line. I really admire the way his sound has matured. I had a feeling all throughout this year that As It Was going to be pretty high on my list, if not at the top. And the more I sat with it, the more I couldn't really see anything else topping it. This was a song that pretty much dominated this year, to the point where I'm honestly shocked it wasn't the song of the year. Like, I don't hate Heat Waves by Glass Animals, it vibes here and there, but I would not say it's as deserving of the top spot on the year-end chart as a song like As It Was. Like, good for them for having a song stay on the chart for 91 weeks and breaking that record, but it's honestly such a meh song. Still though, As It Was landed the number 2 spot, not bad at all. This is such a chill song. Yeah, there are elements of the song that remind me a bit of the King of New Wave songs Take On Me by a-ha, but it's got this indie vibe that's really pleasant to hear. The keyboards sound quite somber, and I really like the sound of the ride cymbal that sounds very 60s inspired, kind of like what Oasis was known for. And another thing I like about the drums is the big sounding fill that takes place after the bridge. The tone is just so classy, and I feel so relaxed whenever I hear this song. But the big thing that's putting As It Was at number 1 here is of course the meaning. In the intro to my Worst Songs video this year, I spoke about detachment from things I didn't think were healthy to have in my life. It can feel like a lot letting go of things, especially things that have been present in your life for a long time. But I always knew that no matter how much it might have felt like a loss at first, it was ultimately for the best and necessary for moving on to a healthier life. After all, change is inevitable, and life can never be the same as it was. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because that's the overarching theme of the song. Harry is definitely alluding to feeling miserable and stagnant. He's feeling a similar sense of loss that I've felt at various points in my life. He feels stuck in a perpetual loop of torment brought on by the past, not knowing how to overcome it or even open up to anyone about it. In the second verse, he quotes someone, perhaps a family member, who says to him, "Harry, you're no good alone," alluding to the fact that not having someone to open up to about these feelings isn't good for him. Keeping your emotions bottled up is one of the unhealthiest things for anyone to do, which is something even I forget sometimes. It's honestly quite powerful how much the song calls out these kinds of unhealthy habits, especially with the mention of Harry possibly being on drugs, which is of course another unhealthy way of coping.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
But then there's this line that puts a lot of this into perspective.
Your daddy lives by himself. Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
One of the most significant changes one can experience is seeing their parents divorce, and I should know because I've lived that experience. I might not have been as young as Harry was when his parents divorced, but it has happened in my life, and I've seen it happen to plenty of people I know. At the beginning of the song, we hear a child say,
"Come on, Harry, we want to say goodnight to you,"
via a voicemail. Contrary to what you might think, that child isn't Harry's, rather it's his goddaughter Ruby, the daughter of his good friend, producer and director Ben Winston. There's no record of him being married or having children of his own, so it isn't clear if he's singing to his hypothetical child or someone that's like a son or daughter to him about the end of his relationship. Maybe he is, or maybe he's referring to his own parents' divorce. Either way, it's still a prominent change, and it leaves you never feeling the same going forward, just like the changes I've experienced. But as depressing as the verses sound, there's something oddly uplifting about the chorus. As much as change might feel scary or disappointing, it can also be seen as a gift. You're being given a chance to pivot from this negative experience and ascend into a better life as a wiser person than you were before. And at that point, you'll never want to look back at how life was in your lowest moments. I've experienced a downward spiral more than once in my life, and I felt bad because of it. But a big thing I've learned in recent years is to not dwell on the negatives and to channel that energy into something positive, something healthy, productive, stimulating, or even just something that makes you happy. Pain is a terrible thing to deal with, but using it as a motivator for change and commitment to making the necessary changes in your life can lead to something truly rewarding. Even if things aren't going to be the same, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. As It Was has been really therapeutic for me, and I can only see it serving a similar purpose as songs like More Than Useless by Reliant K and Breathin' by Ariana Grande as my cheer-up songs. I'm glad I had the song to turn to this year, and I'm also glad songs like this and the other songs featured in this video are helping me to feel like we're really furthering ourselves in the direction to make pop music great again. Of course, this video would not be complete without my rundown of the albums I enjoyed this year. This was the best year for albums I've experienced since 2016 at the earliest and 2019 at the latest. Come to think of it, this year was a lot like 2016, and that despite it not being a year I really enjoyed, one of the best aspects about it was the music. So many of my favorite bands put out albums this year, it was insane. Add to that the bands that made a return after a long period of absence, and you have one of the most memorable years for albums in a long time. In a somewhat accurate order of enjoyment, my 2022 albums include, but are not limited to, get ready, Carly Rae Jepsen's The Loneliest Time, Yep, I finally got into her stuff just like I mentioned in Worst Songs of 2012. Varial's Scars for You to Remember, Revocation's Nether Heaven, Biba Doobie's Beatopia, Huffer's Idiot Witchcraft, Thousand Arrows' Kingdom of the Dead, Ocean Grove's Up in the Air Forever, Turnover's Myself in the Way, Wildness's Resurrection, Sleeping Lion's Most Improved, Palais Royale's Fever Dream, Crowbot's Feel This, Rollo Tomasi's Where Myth Becomes Memory, As It Is I Went to Hell and Back, Armor for Sleep's The Rain Museum, Back to Zero's, Set It Off's Elsewhere, I Built the Sky's The Quiet Place Away, Streetlight Circus's Superfine, Fleshwater's We're Not Here to Be Loved, Exist Immortal's Self-Titled, Threshold's Dividing Lines, Cherry on Moore's Spiritual Ascension, Tala's The Generation of Danger, Magnolia Park's Baku's Revenge and Heart Eater, Palisades Reaching Hypercritical, Dreamwake's Virtual Reality, Mom Jean's Sweet Tooth, Underoath's Voyeurist, Hailstorm's Back from the Dead, Saint Asonia's Introvert Extrovert, Great American Ghost's Torture World, The Mars Volta's Self-Titled, Alexis on Fire's Otherness, No Pressure's Self-Titled, The Deer Hunter's Antimai, Miss May I's Curse of Existence, Dragonland's The Power of the Night Star, Nickelback's Get Rollin', Soilwork's Overgiven Hetten, I'm sorry if I butchered that, Census Fail's Hell is in Your Head, Ailstorm's Seventh Rum of a Seventh Rum, Crossing the Rubicon's Awaken, Porcupine Tree's Closure Continuation, Seventh Wonder's The Testament, Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, The Algorithm's Data Renaissance, Waves of Blaze's Heart of Glass, Projected's Hypoxia, For the Likes of You's Pain Perspective, Battle Beast's Circus of Doom, Hidden in Plainview's Tantrums, Machine Head's Of Kingdom and Crown, Rammstein's Zeit, Power Glove's Flawless Victory, Paul Wardingham's Electromancer Drone City, Fozzie's Boombox, Disturbed's Divisive, A Notion of Silence's Nomad, In Her Own Words Distance or Decay, Comeback Kids Heavy Steps, Florence and the Machine's Dance Fever, The Devil Wears Prada's Color Decay, A Marionette's Gemini, True North's Out Loud, Joyce Manor's 40 Ounce to Fresno, Cancer Bat's Jailbreak, Varsity's Welcome Home, The Early November's 20, Sabaton's The War to End All Wars, the band formerly known as Slaves, Rain City Drive's Self-Titled, Rings of Saturn's Self-Titled, Harry Styles' Harry's House, The Weeknd's Dawn FM, Pine Grove's 1111, Defecto's Worlds Collide, Avoid's Cult Mentality, Stand Atlantic's Fear, Kirk Hammett's Portals, Lines in the Sky's Insight, 1OK Rock's Luxury Disease, I Prevail's True Power, Pups, The Unraveling of Pup the Band, Shinedown's Planet Zero, Slash's 4, Stick to Your Guns, Spectre, No Trigger's Dr. Album, The Offering's Seeing the Elephant, Anxious's Little Green House, Jared Dine's The Grey, Larry Basilio's Your Love, Dragged Under's Upright Animals, Architect's The Classic Symptoms of a Broken Spirit, Michael Romeo's War of the Worlds Part 2, Steve Vai's and Violate, The Wonder Years' The Hum Goes On Forever, Stryper's The
Final Battle,
Devin Townsend's Light Work and Night Work, Slipknot's The End So Far, Invalid's Permanence, Andy Gillian's Arcade Metal, Red-Handed Denial's I'd Rather Be Asleep, Astronoid's Radiant Bloom, Coed and Cambria's Vaxis Act 2, A Window of the Waking Mind, Lamb of God's Omens, Northlane's Obsidian, Dance Gavin Dance's Jackpot Juicer, Allegion's Damnum, A Wilhelm Scream's Lose Your Delusion, Fire from the Gods' Soul Revolution, Silverstein's Misery Made Me, Oceans of Slumber's Starlight and Ash, There's There 3, Motionless in White's Scoring the End of the World, Parkway Drive's Darker Still, Knucklepuck's Disposable Life, The Fallen States Between Hope and Disillusion, Moontooth's Phototroph, Monuments in Stasis, Without Waves Comedian, State Champs Kings of the New Age, Meshuggah's Immutable, Jason Richardson's 2, Nothing More's Spirits, Shadow of Intense Elegy, Persephone's Metanoia, Polyphia's Remember That You Will Die, Belmont's Aftermath, Red Hot Chili Peppers' Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen, Wilderun's Epigon, Andy Timmons' Electric Truth, Animals as Leaders' Parrhesia, Appear Unbound's Multiplicity. By the way, to anybody that's ever asked me over the last 4 years, where's Scoutmeister? Here's your answer. Go support his stuff. Joe Satriani's The Elephants of Mars, and my no surprise favorite album of this year, Alter Bridge's Pawns and Kings, the best and heaviest album they've made since Fortress. If you haven't heard of any of these albums and they sound interesting to you, do check them out wherever you can. 2022 might have had its difficulties, but the music more than helped to make it bearable. I'm not just saying that because of the incredible album releases this year, but also because I feel like this year's Best Songs video has my favorite overall selection of pop songs I've ever covered, and I feel proud for putting all this together. I'm hopeful 2023 will prove to be a year for more pivoting and growth, not just for me, but for all of you watching as well. Next year's gonna see the 10-year anniversary of when I created this channel and started making videos, and I do have a couple things in mind that I want to do in honor of the occasion. I might even get started writing the script pretty soon after this video finishes premiering, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you also to Atticus the Death Metaler for all your help with the Joji segment.
You're welcome, babe.
Take care and have a nice day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time. Will anyone like us when we're 23?
Let's find out.